everyone, welcome back into an Inside Gophers Nation podcast. My name is Dylan Callaghan-Croley, the publisher of Gophers Nation at On 3. Want to come back into today with another Gophers game day preview. I know we didn't get a recap of last week's game up. That will not be the case this week. We will have a recap of the game up on hopefully Saturday evening. If not Saturday evening, early Sunday, we will get that recap up. But we want to talk about Minnesota versus Northwestern State here on Saturday afternoon at Huntington Bank Stadium, 11 a.m. kickoff time, Central Time. Game will be televised on Big Ten Network. Be sure, if you're not at the game, be sure to tune in to BTN. You will hear a familiar voice on the call, calling the game alongside play-by-play announcer Jordan Ross Jr. is former Golden Gophers quarterback Tanner Morgan, former Gophers women golfer Emma Carpenter will also be in the call as a sideline reporter. But before we dive into this week's game, be sure, if you're not, to head over to Gophers Nation. And if you join Gophers Nation now for $1 your first week, enjoy a complimentary year of The Athletic included with your Gophers Nation membership. Again, join Gophers Nation now for $1 your first week and enjoy a complimentary year of The Athletic included with your membership. You will not find a better deal out there for your Minnesota Golden Gophers coverage. If you want to take advantage of that deal, go to www.on3.com/sites/Gophers-Nation/join. And I will provide that link as well in the comments. But Gophers taking on Northwestern State on Saturday, a game where Minnesota is not going to be favored by 15 points, 20 points, 30 points. We're talking about a spread here in this game that is going to be upwards of 45 to 50 points. This is a Northwestern State team that last week did beat Alcorn State 20-10, but that was their first win in their last 20 tries. This is just a Northwestern State team that is going to be completely outmatched by the Golden Gophers on both sides of the football. We're going to talk today about what to expect in this game from the Golden Gophers, some key depth players to watch. We'll go over keys to the game as much as there can be in this type of game, as well as go over a final score prediction. So what should Gophers fans expect on Saturday between the Golden Gophers and Northwestern State? Let's go over 5 key topics I think we should expect as whether you're a member of the media or a fan. One, I'm looking for efficiency on both sides of the football from Minnesota. This is a game where you're going to severely outmatch Northwestern State on both sides of the ball. We went over in our scout report on Northwestern State yesterday on Gophers Nation. We went over the size difference in the trenches, which is going to be a big part of this game and the reason why Minnesota is going to run away with it. If you look at the size difference, the average Northwestern State offensive lineman is 6'3.5", 286 pounds. The starting Minnesota defensive lineman, the starting defensive lineman for the Golden Gophers, so Anthony Smith, Jalen Logan-Redding, Devin Eastern, Jackson Howard, 6'5", 288 pounds. And that, that's an average because Anthony Smith is 285, Jalen Logan-Redding, 295, Devin Eastern, 320, Jackson Howard, 6'4". 250, but 6'4". All 4 starting defensive linemen are 6'4" or above, all weigh 250 plus pounds. You look at Northwestern State across their offensive linemen, 305s, 265, 295, 295, 270. They don't have no size, but compared to what Minnesota goes up against a weekly basis in the Big Ten, this is a very small opposing offensive line for Northwestern State. With that being said, efficiency on both sides of the ball. I'm looking for offensively for Minnesota. This is a game where if you're Minnesota, you should be averaging 6-7 yards a play, honestly, in both the passing attack and the rushing attack. The rushing attack is where I really want to see the Golden Gophers take a step forward from last week. Obviously, Darius Taylor last week was great, over 175 total yards of offense. But the rest of the room really did not live up to expectations that we set for that room coming into the season. Looking at the stats right here, A.J. Turner last week, 6 carries, 16 yards, 2.7 average. Cam Davis, 4 carries, 12 yards, 3 yard average. Those are not going to get it done in Big Ten play. they almost, I mean, I wouldn't say almost, but they didn't get it done last week against a Buffalo defense that, yes, improved from a year ago, but still a Buffalo defense that the Minnesota Golden Gophers offensive line should have been able to dominate for 4 quarters. Last year, running the ball was a major issue for the Gophers on the offensive line. This year, I mean, through week one, it was a good perform. It was an okay performance. Darius Taylor was fantastic. 30 for 141, 4.7 yards per carry. Longest of the day was 18. So I mean, that long only being 18 tells you that he had to work for those yardage. It's not like he had a 70, 80-yard touchdown run that made up most of his yardage. No, he had to work for each and every one of those carries and all 141 yards of rushing. But the 2.7 yards for A.J. Turner, 3 yards for Cam Davis is simply not going to get it done. The Gophers have to improve on the ground. The offensive line has to improve in opening up holes, whether it's zone or gap. They have to improve in that area. And that's what I'm looking for this week from the offensive line. I want to see the offensive line go out there for 4 quarters. If you want to say 3 for the starters, 3 quarters for the starters, and dominate Northwestern State from the first whistle until they leave the game. That is really what I want to see. I want to see the Gophers average 6-7 yards per carry on the ground at least in this game. That includes A.J. Turner. That includes Cam Davis. Cam Davis could be maybe around 4.5 to 5 yards, but I want to see him up there. I want to see A.J. Turner have some of those big runs that we saw him have at Marshall. He doesn't need to have 2 or 3 of those, but let's see what A.J. Turner can do. Let's see him break off a long run after the Gophers offensive line opens up a hole for him. Let's see Darius Taylor go over 100 yards on maybe 12 carries. That's the type of game that Minnesota's rushing attack should have on Saturday against Northwestern State. If they replicate their performance against Northwestern State that they did against Buffalo last Thursday, it is not going to cut it, and it will be to me at least, a concern for the Gophers heading into the rest of their schedule. The offensive line has to play better than they did last week. I thought they did pretty well in the pass protection, and they did that last year pretty well as well. But they need to definitely do better on the ground this week against a Northwestern State front seven that they are going to have an immense size difference over and should dominate for all 4 quarters. So that's the first thing I'm watching for when it comes to efficiency. Also, building on top of that efficiency, Drake Lindsey. Last week was good. 19 for 35, 292 touchdowns, 1 interception. The interception, not his fault. But let's see him this week complete, upwards of 65 to 70% of his passes. That's what he should be able to do as a Power 4 quarterback against an FCS defense that is, while they won last week, this is still a Northwestern State team that I imagine will only win another game or 2 this season at best. I want to see Drake Lindsey complete. I'm bad with mental math, so let me do a quick. Let's see if Drake Lindsey can go 14 for 20 this week for 230 yards and 2 touchdowns, I think that's a great week. I really don't care about the yards. I really don't care about the touchdowns. I want to see Drake Lindsey and this wide receiver room be efficient. 14 for 20, 15 for 21, in that range. I don't think he needs to pass the ball as much as he did last week. If they do, I think it's either probably a poor choice of game planning or Minnesota's in trouble. Because they shouldn't have to pass the ball in this game. They should run the ball in this game upwards of 55 times if they have 75 plays. It should be 20 passes in this game total for Minnesota. I'm sure it'll be around 25, but nonetheless, Minnesota shouldn't have to throw the ball around a ton. This is a game they should rely on that rushing attack. But when they do throw the ball, I want Drake Lindsey to be efficient and effective. I want to see him throw it down the field a little bit more. Let's see what this passing attack can do to be explosive down the field. Greg Harbaugh Jr. talked about that in his press conference this week when it was brought up about the Gophers' red zone and green zone struggles. For Minnesota to really be the offense they want to be, they need to score before they get to the green zone. They need to score before they get to the red zone. The best offenses are the offenses that can be explosive from any part of the field and can score on any play from any part of the field. I want to see that from the Gophers this week. I want to see them be explosive and efficient. Back to Drake Lindsey. I want to see him complete 65-75% of his passes. The yardage marks don't have to be incredibly high, but let's see if he can average, upwards of 13 to 14 yards per reception in this type of game against a defense that Minnesota, again, is going to terribly outmatch when it comes to athleticism, size, speed. That's what I want to see out of the Minnesota offense. Minnesota defense, it really should just be a replication of last week, and plus, it should be even better. Against what should be a good Buffalo offense, they kept Buffalo to 151 yards of total offense, just 107 passing yards, 44 rushing yards, only allowed 3.4 yards per carry, 1.8 yards per rush. That's what I want to see out of this Minnesota defense again this week. But honestly, Minnesota's starting defense shouldn't give up any points to this Northwestern State offense. I would say the second string shouldn't give up any points to this Northwestern State offense. Maybe the third string. Maybe if you go beyond that, sure. In those scenarios, yes, it would be a little bit more acceptable. But the Minnesota defense really should pitch a shutout against this Northwestern State offense. In terms of total yardage, I'm not going to be really concerned about a total yardage, but that starting defense, I'm expecting if they have, 9, 10 total drives against this Northwestern State offense, 8, 9 of those, if not all 10 of those, should be 3 and outs. They're going to obviously get yardage, but I'm looking for this Minnesota defense to get on the field, get off the field efficiently. It doesn't have to be 3 and outs, but I don't want to see this Minnesota defense this week, drives that are 6, 7, 8 plays consistently. And once in a while, okay. But most of these drives from Minnesota's defense should be 6 plays or less and to get off the field. I expect them to shut down this Northwestern State rushing attack. The biggest, piece of this Northwestern State rushing attack is quarterback Abram Johnson. He's a redshirt freshman quarterback, dual threat kid who has, pretty good legs. He rushed for 69 yards last week on 17 carries, including a longer 20. But I expect him to shut him down. Obviously, that type of dual threat quarterback does pose a little bit of a different type of offense to prepare for. But again, the Gophers' athleticism and speed on defense should be able to contain Johnson in this rushing attack. And Northwestern State can't throw the ball consistently against this Minnesota defense, especially downfield. So everything's going to be short for Northwestern State. Johnson in his career just 3 for 19 on passes of 20 plus yards. I don't see them having much success. Maybe they get 1 or 2 big chunk plays, but that's about it. I really expect this Minnesota defense to dominate from start to finish on Saturday. At least the starters and even the second and third team defenses, I expect to have really strong and efficient performances. That's the key word for me this week is efficiency out of Minnesota. Get on both sides. Offensively, Minnesota shouldn't have a ton of extended drives unless it's by design, like last week to end the game against Buffalo. If they're going for designed longer drives, sure, it's a great time to work on those types of things. But otherwise, Minnesota should average, upwards of 7, 8 yards per play. They should score rather quickly in this game when they do score. The defense is going to get plenty of reps. The offense is going to get reps, plenty of reps just from how many times they get to take the field. What I'm going to be curious is, quite frankly, if we're being honest, this Northwestern State team that Minnesota wanted to play their, to their highest capabilities for 4 quarters, that this would be a complete, thrashing of Northwestern State. This Northwestern State team gave up 87 points to South Alabama last year. I'm not saying Minnesota would necessarily hang 100 points on Northwestern State if they wanted to, but this is very much a game that Minnesota, if they went out there for 4 quarters, played their starters for 4 quarters, could very much efficiently win this game upwards by 70 points. I don't think we're going to see that. I think this is going to end up in that 58 to 3, 58-6 type range for Minnesota. But we'll get into the predictions. But yeah, efficiency wise, this is a game that Minnesota's offense should be able to move the ball up and down the field with will, and then defensively, Minnesota should be able to get off the field pretty consistently, pretty quickly. any sort of extended drives for Northwestern State's offense against the Gophers defense would more or less kind of be concerning. It's not necessarily going to be like, oh, if that happens, it's a major worry, something that Minnesota desperately needs to clean up. But things would have to go wrong for that to happen. Moving on, and what we're expecting out of this game. Tons of snaps for younger players and depth pieces. This game should be out of hand by halftime. Minnesota should be up 28-0, 35-0 at halftime, in my opinion. That means the second string, the third string players, the depth players, your younger players, redshirt freshmen, should get plenty of reps in this game. I'm looking for guys like Fame Ajiboye to get snaps. Khalid Tafe, Riley Sunram at defensive tackle, Naeem Parrish at corner, Zahir Rayner at safety. And I mean, it goes beyond those guys. Even redshirt sophomores like Malachi Coleman, Khalid Tafe, the offensive lineman backing up Nathan Roy, Stephen Curtis, the FCS transfer. Any type of depth player in this game should get plenty of reps. And then you're also talking about a serious amount of reps for a guy like Emmanuel Carmo and Matt Kingsbury, who both played last week, both played about, between defense special teams, both played about 12 to 15 snaps. They should get 20, 30 snaps in this game easily. So, I mean, a ton of snaps to go around in this game. Minnesota last year against Rhode Island played 65 players. I expect similar numbers against Northwestern State on Saturday. And for comparison, Minnesota last week played, I believe, 38 players total between offense and defense. Very comparative to what they did against North Carolina last year when they played 39. And they averaged about 35 to 40 players in most games. So you're talking about another 25 to 30 players seeing the field in a game like this for Minnesota. So a ton of snaps for those younger players and depth players. It's going to be in a blowout situation. It's going to be against guys that they're still very much overmatching in terms of talent and physicality. But those in-game reps are going to be really important for Minnesota going forward. So that's something I'm going to be really interested to see. Who gets to see the field, the level in terms of how much they see the field, their total snaps, and their total production on those snaps. Going back to offense, we already talked about it, but I want to see Minnesota's tailbacks, A.J. Turner and Cam Davis, even Fame Ajiboye, have good games. Darius Taylor last week had, like we said, 141 yards. A.J. Turner, 6 carries for 16 yards. Cam Davis, 4 carries for 12 yards. We need to see more out of those two. I want to see what they can do against the Northwestern State offense. Can they get more production out of those two backs? I think they absolutely need to do that this week. For the Gophers to reach their offensive ceiling in 2025, those two need to have strong seasons. They don't have to have prolific seasons, but they need to be strong when called upon. So this would be a great week for them to get their feet underneath them and really build momentum as they had, into the harder part of the schedule, Cal, Rutgers, Ohio State. Final big thing again offensively. I want to see Minnesota finish drives this week. We mentioned it. I think we already mentioned it, but 7 drives into Buffalo territory that went to Buffalo's 25-yard line or deeper. Only 2 touchdowns. That is not going to get it done later in the season. Minnesota has to score touchdowns this week. If they get 10 drives to Buffalo's 25 or deeper, they better score 7 or 8 touchdowns at least in this game. Brady Dannenberg should really only have, 8, 9 extra points. Maybe they give Daniel Jackson a couple. But maybe not 9. 9's a little bit on the higher side. But still. I think Minnesota scoring 9, 10 touchdowns this game is in the realm of possibility, depending on, again, how conservative they choose to go as the game progresses. But Daniel, the kicking game should mostly be kicking extra points in this game. I need to see Minnesota, score 6, 7 touchdowns in this game. And going back to it, I don't expect them to get into much of the green zone or red zone. I expect them to have 3, 4 touchdowns of 30, 40 yards in this game, whether it's through the air or the ground. and then maybe three touchdowns on the ground, not on the ground, but three touchdowns that come within the green zone or red zone. So that's what I'll be looking for out of that. I want to see Minnesota finish drives this week after last week's struggles. Let's briefly go into what to expect out of Northwestern State. Offensively, ran by second-year offensive coordinator Carson Stewart. They run a moderate tempo spread offense. Like I said, quarterback Abram Johnson, dual threat capabilities there. This is a Northwestern State team that is a run-heavy offense. They ran the ball about 60% of the time last week against Alcorn State. 41 runs to 18 passing attempts, so about a 70-30 split. So I do expect them to run the ball quite a bit on Saturday. Try to shorten up this game. They're not going to win this game. They know they're not going to win this game. It's about for them not getting completely embarrassed, and one way to do that is to shorten the clock. While they are shorten the game. While they're a moderate tempo spread offense, I do expect them to go maybe on the little slower side. I expect them to drain that play clock, try to keep this one as close as possible for as long as possible. So expect run heavy offense on Saturday after them out of Northwestern State. Poor team on third and fourth down. Last year converted just 22% of all third down attempts. Last week against Alcorn State, they were converting at a 23% rate. And they struggled to finish drives when in the red zone. 14 of 22 red zone opportunities last year, which resulted in points, but only 8 of those were touchdowns. Abram Johnson, went over him again. He can run. He's not much of a threat through the air though. A lot of his passes will be short passes. So when they do throw the ball, they're going to rely on the short and intermediate game. He's not going to throw down the field consistently or efficiently. When you get pressure on him, he struggles a ton. I apologize. I said 3 for 19 stat earlier about throwing the ball downfield. That's actually under pressure. He's 3 for 19 in his career. But that's a 15% completion rate. He has 2 interceptions when under pressure in his career. He doesn't handle the blitz well. So I do wonder how aggressive, defense coordinator Danny Collins is going to be against this Northwestern State offense. I don't think Minnesota is going to have to blitz to get pressure on them consistently. But when he is pressured, it does not usually go well for Northwestern State. A quick summary there, since I did kind of cover a lot and messed it up a little bit. Capable dual threat quarterback, not going to pass the ball downfield efficiently or consistently, relies on the short and intermediate game, struggles under pressure. Go to the running game. I expect them to use 2 running backs in this game, Mayan Hicks and Colby Burrell. Last week, Hicks 53 yards and 7 carries. Burrell 9 carries for 44 yards. Both players show the ability to break tackles. Minnesota last week against Buffalo had 0 missed tackles after having 22 against North Carolina a year ago. The offense is very much 50-50 between zone and gap runs, so nothing to really, no dead giveaways there in terms of that. With their backs last week, 9 zone run carries, 12 gap run carries. Out of the 2, Burrell is the one likely to factor into the receiving game. He had 2 receptions last week for 8 yards. But seeing what Minnesota did against a Buffalo offense last week that is really good at running the ball with L.J. Henderson, I don't expect Northwestern State to be successful running the ball at all on Saturday. I think their best bet is going to be with Abram Johnson's legs and some RPO action. But the running backs themselves, design runs, I don't see them having success. I think this is a game that Northwestern State could end up with, just 4 or 5 rushing yards. It's very much happened in the past. It very much can happen again. I don't expect Northwestern State to have success running the ball against this front 7, especially after what we saw last week against Buffalo. When it comes to receiving and tight end targets, no true number one wide receiver target for Northwestern State. They have three wide receivers to watch: Ben Busen, Amaz Eugene, and Ty Moore. But I think their biggest weapon could be tight end Luke Carter, a North Texas transfer. Very good blocker as well, but he had two targets last week, their most targeted tight end. But I think he could be the guy who maybe has the most success this week in the passing game. But again, I don't expect Northwestern State to really have much success in this game offensively against the Gophers. Again, an improved team from last year, but you look at what they did against South Alabama last year, and the final score is 87-0. But you look at the team stats, 171 total yards for North. Sorry, 237 total yards for Northwestern State against South Alabama. That's against South Alabama. That's not against defense that was a top 10 defense in all of college football last year and could be once again in 2025. This is a game where I really expect Minnesota to really just give up the bare minimum in terms of accumulated stats for Northwestern State. Rhode Island last year, 135 total yards, 117 passing yards, 18 rushing yards. That's probably a good baseline for this week's game. I would even put it a little bit lower than that. I think you could reasonably see Northwestern State just scratching around 100 total yards in this game, with a large majority of that being through the air. I expect the rushing attack to really be kept to a minimal. Maybe they keep it under 10, but I don't expect Northwestern State to have really more than 20, 25 yards on the ground, if that, in this game. If they do, it's going to, once again, be from the quarterback, Abram Johnston. And the big reason I expect the rushing game to be shut down and passing game to really be inefficient is that this is a Northwestern State offensive line that has struggled the last 2 years. They were okay last week against Alcorn State. And now they're going up against a really experienced, talented, physical, very strong Minnesota front seven, especially those front four, and Anthony Smith, Jalen Ogunredden, Devin Eastern, and Jackson Howard. I just don't expect this matchup to go very well for Northwestern State. They will struggle with the size and strength of Minnesota's defensive line. They did perfectly fine last week, but they're going to have a long day on Saturday. Defensively for Northwestern State, going over that side of the ball, last year, this was a defense that allowed 45 points per game. We talked about the 80 something points in South Alabama last year. They allowed per game almost 500 yards of total offense. That is a lot of offense in one game. Again, improved, but are they really that much improved? This is going to go from 499 to 350 this year? Probably not. Minnesota is going to be able to move the ball at will against Northwestern State. Northwestern State allowed almost 240 rushing yards last season, 257 passing yards per game last season. This is a game that Minnesota is going to, just be able to work on all the small things offensively. There is no avenue to success for this Northwestern State defense outside of Minnesota having self-inflicted wounds. I could go deeper into this Northwestern State defense, but I don't think that's a good use of my time or your time listening to this podcast. It's just, I've said it many times, it's just a terrible matchup for Northwestern State. It may not be as bad as Ohio State matching up against Grambling State this weekend, considering how talented Ohio State is, but this may be the second most, this is the second widest talent gap in any game this weekend in college football involving an FBS team, and I expect the results to show that. With that, I think we get into kind of keys to the game, and we went over most of them. So I think the last biggest key to the game, and I guess to recap, the keys to the game: efficiency, finish drives, get the rushing attack going with those backup running backs, AJ Turner, and Cam Davis, Fama Ajaboy as well. be efficient on offense in general. Defensively, be efficient. Get on the field, get off the field, get them off the field within 4, 5, 6 plays at most. But the biggest key to this game for Minnesota, the absolute biggest key, stay healthy. This is not a game you want to, lose an important player for the season. This is not a game that you want to lose key depth players for an extended period of time. This is a game that you get your starters the reps they need, you build a big lead early, you get them out, and you let the backups do the work. This is not a game to risk your key players. Darius Taylor should not see more than 14, 15 carries in this game. Corey Parrish should not see a ton of snaps defensively in this game. Penciling him in for maybe 30 snaps in this game, I think would be good. But, penciling in all those starters for 30 snaps defensively, I think would be good. But, they really should not play much more than 30, 40 snaps at most. Even before this game is out of hand, I think Minnesota should be subbing in second and third stringers in to get time again with the ones against Northwestern State's ones. I think that'd be very valuable. But going back here quickly, looking at the snap count from last year's game against Rhode Island, just to see what they did. Defensively, Ethan Robinson last year, 32 snaps. Josh Joyner, 23 snaps. So 25, 30 snaps is probably what these starters are going to see. And then offensively, last year, Minnesota gave Darius Taylor 14 carries. Max Brosmer last year saw, 60 snaps. I don't think Darius Taylor needs to see that many snaps. I don't think Drake Lindsey needs to see that many snaps in this game. But taking the load off Darius Taylor in this game, taking the load off some of the bigger wide receivers, get Jalen Smith his reps, but don't risk injury Jalen Smith. Javon Tracy, Logan Loya, it may be valuable to get him some more reps with Drake Lindsey, but don't overexpose these players. These are one of those games where if you overexpose a player, the game's already a 40-point game in the third quarter. You lose a starter or key backup for an extended period of time. Those are the type of injuries that coaches have to answer. Give legitimate answers about why they were in that game at that point in the game. And I know last year there was times against even Big Ten opponents that Minnesota could have put in their backups early in the game, but PJ Fleck wanted to make sure the game was out of hand. That the game was, quote unquote, finished before the end of the game. That really shouldn't be the case this week. The case this week should be get the starters some quality work through 2.5 to 3 quarters of play, and let the backups get plenty of opportunities in that third and fourth quarter. Get those guys some quality game reps. I think one of my biggest things about that I like to see just out of PJ Fleck more in these types of games is getting those depth players just, considerable reps, because that does pay off in the long run if you lose a key guy or two as the season progresses. The more snaps, the merrier for those types of players. Just don't risk injuries to your starters. I know I pretty much went over that way longer than I should have, but I just can't stress it enough. But that's the biggest key to the game this week. And then otherwise, final score prediction for this one, it's going to be a blowout. The S&P Plus from Bill Connolly, I think, has it at 48-0. The Massey ratings on on 3 have it at 49-0. I'm going to go with Minnesota 59, Northwestern State 6. I expect it to be a big day for Minnesota's offense and rushing attack, especially. Expect the defense to be efficient all day long. Maybe Northwestern State gets a field goal or two late in this game. Honestly, 6 points is too much. Let's go 59-3. So 59-3. Northwestern State gets a late field goal here just to get on the board. But Yeah, I like Minnesota win this one. Win this one big. Big day for the offense. Big day for the rushing attack. Uh, I'm even going to go on a limb and say I expect AJ Turner to have a 40 plus yard touchdown run this game. I expect him to finish this game on Saturday with 80 plus yards of total rushing. So watch out for AJ Turner. Watch out for this rushing attack. Enjoy the game if you're heading out to Huntington Bank Stadium on Saturday, everybody. Should be a fun one to relax. I expect attendance to be a little bit more on the scarcer side, so it may not be a bad game to kick up your feet, sit back and enjoy the show. If you're at home, enjoy some nice burgers, enjoy the game from the comforts of your couch. But until next time, enjoy the rest of the week, enjoy the game, and we'll talk to you real soon. Shortly after the Gophers defeat Northwestern State on Saturday afternoon. But until then, have a good one, everybody. Talk soon.